Hey there, Juan Morales here, and in today's episode we're going to talk a little bit about a distinction that entrepreneurs should be making, especially when starting a new project or venturing into a new idea, because it's really what makes a key difference between taking an idea the distance and really getting the feedback that you need in order to move it forward versus having it as a pipe dream that never gets done. And let me explain where this comes from. So a couple of years back, I had this project with a previous business partner. And when we got into the project, we wanted to do something where it was a weekly event that we did. And what ended up happening was we started on week one. We were feeling very good about it. We were hyped up. So we got a lot of good feedback from that first thing that we did, first episode that we did on a week one. And then it was like this weekly thing. And by week 5 or so, we were kind of out of it. And the project never really did anything with it. And now that I'm doing a daily frequency podcast, as well as other things that I'm doing on a daily basis, I realize that when you're starting out a project, one of the best things you can do is to get as much feedback as you can as quickly as possible. And this isn't the idea of like doing one thing once and getting all this bunch of feedback, but actually actively getting feedback, reassessing, launching, getting feedback again. In the software development world, and that's where I come from originally, it's an iterative process, right? You have to compile things all the time. If you're programming something, you'll just run it and see where it stops, and then you do it again. And then you run it again, and you see where it stops, and you do it again, and you fix the problems as you see them happening. Now, that's the approach that we take as a coder to debugging something or really getting it out. Because you don't wait. Let's say you're coding something and you're creating a page or creating whatever you want to create. And then you wait like a week between runs. Think about it. It'll never get finished because you waste a whole week and then you run it again and now you notice there's a new problem, so now you need to fix it. But if you guys know any programmer out there, you know that the way that you program is that you run it all the time. Like you keep running and you run into issues and you fix the issue and you run it again and you run it again. And that intensity at the beginning of the cycle, that's where the key comes in. Because that's how you're going to get a lot of feedback really fast. And then you can integrate feedback and then launch with the integrated feedback, which is kind of like you're debugging your own content creation, your own idea pursuit. Now, what's the problem that happens with most people? That because we don't believe in this way of doing it, but rather we'd like to show up with the finished product right away, we delay, thinking that in the future, this product will have those things and will be a version that is like, wow, amazing, that everybody jumps up over, right? And that will happen. But what you have to understand is that you want to think of your audience in stages, right? You're going to have the early adopters, the people that don't care that it's rough, right? But they are there to give you feedback. This is why so many software companies nowadays, before they get to that MRR model, which is the monthly revenue, they do lifetime deals. And if you've seen any of these sites where they promote lifetime deals and people can buy into lifetime deals, as I have on many occasions, part of the reason they do that is because these early adopters give them feedback that allows them to make their product better, so it's more valuable to everybody else who buys it. And it is only through feedback that we get better. Now, going back to that story, what I realized is at that time, what we should have done, and what we didn't do, obviously, is that we should have gotten out there all the time. Just keep at it and do another one, get feedback, listen to what they're saying, integrate what needs integrating, and then discard what isn't really relevant, and then you keep pushing, right? This is why comedians, when they go on a stand-up tour, they're doing shows every night. It's not a week between shows. And this is why, because you have to create that acceleration of feedback. And to create that acceleration of feedback, you have to create an acceleration of output. Because otherwise, people will just be giving you feedback on the same thing that you've been getting feedback on for a long time. So in that case, it's just a validation of the feedback to see whether that's good or not. But if you have several at-bats, if you're creating several pieces of content, if you're creating, let's say you want to write a book, well, you can write one book and it can take you forever, or you can write a book now, put it out there, get some feedback from the market, you can write a second book, get some more feedback from the market. So by the time you get to that book that you're thinking about right now, that perfect book, that book that's like a bestseller, that turns out to be your 8th book, your 9th book. Why? Because you got the feedback. You learned along the way. But so many times, because we don't want to feel embarrassed, or we think that later on in the future we will become this person that now is magically able to do it without having to go through the process, that's what keeps us away from it. That's why most ideas never pan out. Because instead of focusing hardcore on it, and I'm saying going all in, getting as much feedback as possible, doing it as much as possible, living it. It's like people when they get into coaching, or any kind of business really, but in coaching I know firsthand, when people get into coaching, but then they're coaching like one person a month, so they never get experience of what it's like to really coach. But what happens when you're, even if it's not for people paying you full boat or paying you what you think you're going to get paid eventually when you sell at your high ticket price point, right? You need to get those notches in your belt. You need to do it with people. You need to help them. You need to focus on what gets them results, what stories that you said are better, right? That's the way that you get better at anything. And going back to this, I remember that one of the offers that I did a couple of years back that really converted well, it was a phone offer. And this is really the strategy that I've used every time that we do a high ticket offer, anything that has to do with closing. And it's the idea of like, hey, just get on the phone. Like, get on the phone every day. It is inevitable that if you do that every day, you're going to figure out the way to close people. Because once you're getting on the phone, and you're getting obviously the right people, I'm not trying to make it so that it's about that, but let's think about it. You get on the phone with these people and you practice every day. After a while, a lot of the things that you do become routine. The stories become routine. Like now you know how to say that story in a way that lands even better. The concepts that you outline get better. Why? Because every time you say it and someone asks you a question, you add that back to your narration of the story or whatever you're teaching in the phone call, because now you know that that's a question that you need to address before it becomes a question, so that they don't feel that there has to be a question for that. And as you get better at this, which is the same thing of like performance, you're going to get feedback. Embrace the feedback. Not as a criticism of someone who's sitting outside and saying, oh, I don't really like this thing. No, don't worry about those. But look for the feedback that can actually help you. The feedback's like, oh, I never thought that I could do this without this. Then obviously that shows you a mental objection they had. That shows you something that was stopping them. And then you can fix it and then move along. Now, if we take that same philosophy of getting feedback as fast as possible by accelerating the creation of whatever it is that you're doing, we took it to content creation, we took it to idea development, and it's the same concept. You need to be able to immerse yourself in it, and you need to be able to get feedback, and then integrate feedback, and then get more feedback, right? You want to relaunch all the time. Part of the reason that I've been doing this, and this is why I'm saying this today, is because I don't know what number of episode this is of this daily podcast, but as I've put the episodes out, I've gotten feedback from different people, and I've integrated some, I've discarded some as well, but I integrate it and then it gets better. And then I just keep doing it because it's the fastest way to get more feedback. As the content keeps coming out and as I keep creating it, I get feedback, I listen to what needs listening to, I integrate the things that need to be integrated, and then I add them to the next version. So the faster you can go through the versions, the faster it will be to create proficiency at anything. It's basically saying practice makes perfect. How good would you really get at playing basketball if you only play basketball 1 day a week versus a guy who's playing 7 days a week, 10 hours a day? Which one of the two do you think gets better faster if they both started at the same starting point? And that's really a concept that we all have to key into. But so many times we do this thing where the frequency is off. We're pushing it in a way where we think we're going to get good by playing basketball once a week. And yes, we may get a little better, but not a lot. And it'll take us forever to really achieve, let's say, concert level greatness in that skill. But if we decide that we're going to practice it every day, every single day, well, guess what happens? We are training every day to get better. And yes, at the beginning it's probably terrible. There are episodes and things that I've created and content pieces that I created a few years back that when I look at them now, I'm like, ooh, that's rough. But you know what? That's okay because it was all part of the stepping stones to get up here, to create more content, to create better, and to integrate feedback without taking it personally, just knowing that, hey, this is what I'm doing, right? Going back to my coder analogy, I want to run it, see where it gets held up so I can fix it, and then I can keep moving and see where it gets held up that next time. So I just wanted to share this with you because I believe that so many of us, when we start a project, we don't really consider this. And we make it so that we're trying to work the least amount possible. And by doing so, what happens is we push off the learning curve. We're expanding it over time instead of making it as quick as possible. I just want to learn real fast. My native language is Spanish. And when you learn English, especially in countries where Spanish is spoken, you learn it by having some classes and stuff in school and whatever. But nothing, absolutely nothing beats being immersed in it. And if you're by yourself in a country where everybody else speaks English, you're going to learn English real quick. And that's the point. You want to put yourself in that position. The position of being forced to do it on a repeated basis where you have to show up. You have to grow fast. Otherwise, you just put it off and then it becomes another project and another thing into the future. Eventually I'll get around to it. Eventually I'll do it. And then it doesn't happen. So from now on, focus on that. How can you make it a daily thing? How can you make it in such a way that you get feedback and you relaunch or put out more content or do whatever the thing is that you want to do? How do you do it faster? If you're selling to people on the phone, how do you test out new things? If you're sitting on the phone with people on a daily basis and you're not testing out new ideas, you're missing out on a huge thing that you could be doing. Because you could be obviously getting better and more proficient at closing people, at selling people, at teaching people, at entertaining people, at doing any of those things. Because that's what we do. That's the practice. But practice has to become an important part of it. It's not just, oh, let's go get those sales and get the result. That's all great. But to get those sales and get the results, you need that practice. And most people want to get good without practicing. That's like getting good at swimming without getting into a pool. Are you really going to do that? No, you need that in there. So just remember, practice, practice, practice. And how can you practice faster? If you can get on a call with someone, right? Embrace it. Like, don't make it about, I want to do the least amount possible and I don't really want to do that because it's a lot of work and whatever. Because then that means that that idea is not that good. But if you get lit up that you're basically wanting to shout it from the rooftops and you're sitting with whoever wants to talk to you about it and you really want to go into this, then embrace it that way. Become obsessed with it. Because at the beginning it's going to be hard, but once that thing takes off and it starts firing off, then it's going to feel easy, and then you can get it to another frequency where now you can go back to being a weekly thing or whatever it is that you want to create. But you need that daily growth that comes from practice. You need it. We all need it. And every time that we create a project, we want to focus on that versus putting it off. Because I could have started this thing and said, hey, you know what? I'm going to do one episode a week. As a matter of fact, one of my friends told me at the beginning to call it something with daily, and I said no, because I don't want to commit to daily. Because again, that same thing, I don't want to do it every day. So I didn't call it daily, but I still do it daily. The most important thing to realize here is that when you are doing it on a daily frequency, or as fast as you can possibly do it, and you're getting feedback, and you're putting it out there, then that's how you get good fast. I could be recording these things and never putting them out. I could be recording these things and never put them on Apple Podcasts or Spotify or any of those things. And I could not share it with my people either. It could just be me practicing by myself. But then I'm not getting the feedback. Then it's just me and my criticism, which is terrible to use for this. So I'd just rather put it out there and see what happens. And that's what I want for you as well. If you have those ideas, if you have those projects, those things that you've been putting in the back burner, just focus on how can you immerse yourself into getting as much feedback as you can. And when you get feedback, you integrate. And when you integrate, you show it to people again. And now if it's fixed, then you'll be good to go. And then some other feedback will come in. And that's great, because what that means is you are evolving your idea, you're evolving your project, you're evolving what you're creating, and that leads to success. Till next time, this is Juan Morales signing out. I'll see you on the next one.